talk about two things. One, how many paper towels do you grab when you go into the bathroom? Randomly. One. Two. Do I have any threes? Don't put your hand up. So there's a TED Talks that I saw, gosh, it's probably 5 years ago. It's called Twist and Shout, or Twist and Fold. And so all you're doing is when you go into the bathroom to wash your hands, and it doesn't matter what size the paper towel is you literally are shaking your hands in the sink so you don't spray the water everywhere and create a safety issue. But you want to fold the paper towel, and you can actually dry your hands completely and even clean off the sink if you wanted to with one paper towel. This does not work with those cheap brown waxy paper towels, just so we're all on the same page. But there's my first announcement. Second one, earlier I talked about each of us doing something to make a change, take a step, do something different. And I loved what Colleen said about ship it back to them. So I've noticed a couple of you guys with Fitbits on. And then the rest of you, most of you have an iPhone. So have you ever tried to recycle your box from either of those items? They've glued the plastic to the cardboard. So you're literally trying to, I had screwdrivers and pliers out. My child absolutely thinks I'm the worst person in the world because I'd go to that even though he loves what I do. But each of us needs to be that step. So this morning at the airport, it's 4 a.m. There's not a whole lot to do. And I wasn't quite awake to read. So I sent an email to Fitbit that said, why do you need to glue these things together? Why can't they be just sitting inside each other so that I can pull them? Better yet, quit putting the damn plastic in the cardboard box. But if each of us makes a step, they change things. If we each start sending back the air pockets, they change things. You know, there's a really neat process. It's called cold press. I don't know how many of you guys have ever ordered, there's a Disney movie club, and they're using, it's called cold press, and literally it fits exactly your DVD. And it cuts it, it puts a label on it, and it shoots it off. And I'm just shocked that Amazon hasn't figured that out yet, because it would save money. It's all about profits and things. So each of us needs to take an action item to either send them an email or send back the crap, because we don't need it. And if we each make a step, then we're all good. Okay, I went a minute too long, sorry. Okay, I'm going to talk about financial stuff, and I've got a case study here. So what's involved in tracking your case study? How do you tell people about profit? You want to start out with reduction. How are you tracking reduction? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Track reuse. We all track reuse. We all track recycling. Landfill or waste to energy, what your expenses are, what your income is, what your avoided disposal cost is. And if possible, track your labor, because labor exists. You're spending labor to do some of this work. And then my whole part of this was, why do you want to get zero waste certified? This is a case study that I'll show in just a moment, but it shows the years and how they're saving money. Notice the jump. It's a substantial jump. It's 1 year. So each of these are a year. So part of the Zero Waste Business Council, which is now the GBCI Zero Waste Group, I'm having trouble with that, created a zero waste diversion. How many of you guys have seen this before? There's a few of you. What we're doing is you're already tracking this information. And most businesses do not want to add to their total generated weight. They've got a goal of reducing their total generated weight. They don't want to add to it. And so we went and we met with colleges and cities and just an entire large group of people that none of us could make up our mind. But we created a zero waste diversion, and that includes reduction. And you want to label them separately so that as a company, if you have a goal to reduce your total generated waste, this won't harm you. But yeah, you can track this information. And by tracking the reduction, you're looking at, I got rid of disposable to-go containers, and I'm using China plates and plastic cups. I went to double-sided paper. You can literally go back to procurement and say, how many did we order before we started this? How many are we ordering now? There is your reduction, and you can track those. We count that towards your 90% diversion or better. So I wanted to hit on that. Why is tracking numbers important? Most businesses or institutes want to know their diversion. They have corporate goals, But most importantly, they have to understand the cost and savings that are involved. You have to show it all, and you want to make sure that you're never double counting. You want to evaluate what it would be if they didn't have a program. So this is something that was really important for HP many years ago, that they said, hey, we're spending this much money to have your diversion program. We're hitting over 90% diversion. It's costing us money to do that. You are right. But it would cost you so much more if you didn't have the program. So that's why I showed you guys that case study of what if you landfilled everything and if you diverted everything, and I'm going to show a different one. This case study is about a pharmaceutical facility. They have a little bit different kind of waste because they have a lot of lab plastics, and unfortunately no one's figured out that if you buy the same kind of plastic throughout, you don't have to sort all of it. But I'm strongly working on that with other businesses. Just same lid, same bottle throughout the entire process, eliminates sorting, and makes life so much easier to divert. So this is some metrics that we track. We track these on a monthly basis for our customer. What's the best thing to do out of this entire thing? It is to recycle, because it only costs $126 a ton instead of either landfilling at $378 a ton or composting at $331. The simplest thing we can do is get more people to recycle. That saves you money. Their diversion right now is at 51%. It's not what we want it to be at because we're having problems with these plastics, but we're finding outlets. The other thing we're tracking is that WARM model, the EPA's WARM model. So this is the pharmaceutical cost-benefit analysis I talked about. This is looking at if I landfilled everything, what it would cost me. Now, this program is smaller. Their diversion's not as high as the last one I showed you, but we're tracking how much the costs were under diversion. They would have paid $2 million. They have it with recycling and trash. And a very important component of this, if you're trying to get the janitors to do more, is make sure that your recycling is next to your trash. Do not park it across the street in the dark, because yes, they will throw it away. You know, and the simplest thing, to be honest with you, is just going out on the dock and changing it. I moved the stack of pallets across the road, put the recycling over here, 8% difference. Boom. So it also tracks how much the savings is. That's in blue, $1.5 million. They still paid $700,000 for this program. They saved $3.3 million. Does that help you keep your program? Definitely. But you have to be constantly reinventing this. Another way to look at this is all the little parts and pieces. How did I save that money? So part of this is almost $271,000. They looked at the compost program. Somebody mentioned earlier the fact that we ship air. Stop doing that. We're putting trucks on the road that create greenhouse gas, and we're spending money on it. You've got to look at every single thing you send out and how full it is. This one looked at the scrap metal vendor. So he was charging to pick up the material, and he was keeping the rebate. Isn't that sweet? We've got to look at the contracts. What are we accepting? What are we agreeing to? Shred service. Why would we be looking at the shred service? How full are they when they pick them up? How often are they on the property? How often are they walking around your building, drinking your coffee for free, and just not taking care of business? So somebody needs to evaluate how full those containers are, how often they come on site. Service reductions, we changed 2 of the compactors so they weren't picked up so often. Centralized trash collection. Talked about it a couple times today. We've actually been going through client by client, changing out the process, bringing in nice containers, doing a full-blown culture change, and showing the savings for them. It is reducing custodians, there's no question about it, but you're changing the culture, you're changing the process. Almost $300,000 in 1 year. So, I showed this just a minute ago. They saved $921,000 last year. I want to say this is probably about 17 million square feet. It's a very large pharmaceutical company, and it's because they're allowing us to evaluate the service and make changes. I think the hardest part of this whole thing is getting them to let us change the service. Oh, it'll smell. Oh, I'm going to have gnats. I have to have lids on the compost in the office area, but you didn't have to have lids on the trash when you had the food in the trash. So, I mean, you've got to challenge people sometimes. They might not want to hear it, but it truly is looking at what is best for this program. It is constantly that we've got to be working on improvement, working with management, measuring your results. We are in front of our customer every single month with this information. Where are we at? What are we trying to do? There's even slide after slide of what site's doing what we're working on, where our holdup is, because it's very important to share where you're stuck. Because it's so easy. They didn't give me an answer. I'll move on to the next place. It's so much easier to fix the problems that we know about and that we can change and save money. Auditing tools. You know, how often do you walk through the building in the different departments and look at what's going on? Checking in with the staff and the survey. Gary Liss and I did a zero waste audit of Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was really hot. But they went and did the 9 points of generations. How many people know about the 9 points of generation? I was going to say, if you don't put your hand up. But you're looking at every single place that's generating trash. Why are they generating trash? What is the trash they're generating? Why isn't it being recycled? But you want to talk to each of these groups to ask them why they're not recycling. What's the problem with the program? Sandia National Laboratory had a huge staff. They were just doing an amazing job, but they had 5 different containers out. They weren't labeled. They're ugly. Some of them stunk. Some of them had too many bags in them. These employees are not stupid. They will go and tell you, hey, I'm not doing it because it's not easy for me to figure out. And so you've got to ask people what they think. Have a meeting, do an ice cream social, have some pizza, whatever it takes to talk to folks and try and take this to that next level. So zero waste facility certification. Why is it there? We were asked for a third-party group to come in and say, yes, I'm doing this right. Yes, my numbers are correct. My facility is doing these things. So a small group of us created the certification following the LEED guidelines. It doesn't follow the pricing of LEED because that's outrageous. There's not that much extra paperwork required. And we looked at what do we want to go by. So we used WIA's zero waste definition. And then we started working with groups to document things. So the first thing is it supports no waste to landfill, incineration, to the environment. They're all equal. We don't want to send stuff to the trash. It drives the development of new markets and jobs. We've seen that today. It meets zero waste business requests for that third-party certification. This certification looks at upstream management. Yes, it includes diversion like the rest of the other groups that do business certifications. But it looks at what is your training, what is your leadership, what's your purchasing priorities, and how do you share that with your staff. It looks at doing waste analysis, and then it starts looking at what your diversion is, and what are you doing with your composting, and how are the levels. It looks at highest and best use, which is a critical part of how all of us are doing business. And then lastly, it just works on strong employee participation. Now, I can tell you honestly that there are companies out there that pay the janitors to sort the trash because they can't get their employees to participate. They're too high and mighty, if you will, that they're not going to do it. So the company has chosen to spend and invest in the environment, which is a nice thing, even though they're not making their folks do their jobs. It eliminates greenwashing concerns, and it's tracking both your dollars and your weights. Some businesses are just looking at their diversion. So those are the most important parts. So what are the next steps? Identify your weights and your costs. Look at what's going on with the city, the county, the waste hauling, as well as businesses. Make sure you're using your avoided disposal cost. If you didn't have to buy it, if you didn't have to send it out as waste, there's dollars associated with that. Learn how to tell your story. What is your story? Who are you talking to about that story to take it to that next level? Is it about diversion? Is it about cost? Or is it about savings? And this was a cool poster we created a couple years ago for Earth Day so that people started looking at what are the steps that I need to take to make a difference.